The courtroom fell silent as my own brother ripped the Purple Heart from my chest, calling me a fake war hero, while our mother nodded approvingly. 3 years of combat tours, 2 surgeries, endless nightmares, all dismissed as lies by the family I fought to protect. The judge banged his gavel, ready to rule against me in this inheritance dispute, when the heavy oak doors burst open. A distinguished man in full military dress uniform strode in, his chest gleaming with stars. My father's commanding general had arrived, and he looked absolutely furious. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? If you're ready for a tale that will restore your faith in karma, hit that like button and subscribe, because this family revenge story gets absolutely wild. Trust me, you won't see this ending coming. My name is Dakota Rivers, and I never imagined that serving my country would become the weapon my family used to destroy me. Growing up in small-town Nebraska, I was always the black sheep. Too rebellious for my mother Margaret's pristine social circle, too independent for my older brother Tyler's taste. While Tyler followed our father's footsteps into corporate law, I chose the Army at 18, desperate to prove myself worthy of the Rivers family name. Dad died in a car accident during my second deployment in Afghanistan. I couldn't even attend his funeral. By the time I returned home missing 2 fingers from an IED explosion and carrying shrapnel in my leg, the family dynamics had shifted completely. Mother had always favored Tyler, but now her disdain for me became openly venomous. She claimed my military service was just an excuse to avoid real responsibilities, that I was using my injuries for attention. The real shock came when Dad's will was read. He had left me his most prized possession, Grandpa Rivers' original farmland worth over $2 million. The property had been in our family for 4 generations, and Dad knew how much those rolling hills meant to me. Every summer before I enlisted, we would walk those fields together, talking about legacy and honor. Tyler got the law firm and most of the liquid assets, but that land represented something money could not buy: roots belonging home. Tyler exploded when the lawyer finished reading. He immediately hired the most expensive legal team in the state, claiming Dad was mentally incompetent when he wrote the will. Mother supported him completely, swearing in depositions that my father was confused about my military service, that he somehow believed I was more heroic than I actually was. They painted me as a manipulative daughter who had brainwashed a grieving father. The lies started small but grew monstrous. Tyler claimed I had exaggerated my combat experience to impress Dad. Mother testified that I had never actually been wounded in action, suggesting my injuries came from a training accident I was too ashamed to admit. They brought in fake witnesses, Tyler's law school buddies, who swore they remembered me confessing to lying about my service record. The most devastating blow came when they challenged my Purple Heart itself. In court papers, Tyler's lawyers claimed I had somehow fraudulently obtained the medal, that my entire military record was fabricated. They demanded the Army investigate me for stolen valor. The local newspaper picked up the story, and suddenly my hometown was buzzing with whispers about the Rivers girl who had apparently lied about being a war hero. I hired the only lawyer I could afford, a kind but overworked public defender named Sarah Martinez. She believed my story, but warned me that family disputes involving this much money rarely ended well for the honest party. The other side had unlimited resources and no scruples about destroying my reputation completely. As months passed, Tyler's campaign against me intensified. He hired a private investigator who somehow obtained sealed military records and twisted them to support their narrative. They found photos of me laughing with fellow soldiers and claimed this proved I was never in real danger. They discovered letters I had written home where I downplayed the risks to avoid worrying Dad, then used those same letters as evidence that I was lying about combat exposure. The worst part was watching people I had known my entire life turn against me. Tyler and Mother worked systematically to poison the community well. They spread rumors at church, at the country club, at every social gathering. Soon even my high school friends were questioning whether they had ever really known me. The girl who had graduated valedictorian, who had sent home pictures from 3 war zones, became a pariah in her own hometown. My military buddies tried to support me, but they were scattered across the country dealing with their own post-deployment challenges. Tyler's lawyers sent threatening letters to anyone who spoke publicly on my behalf, claiming they would be named as co-conspirators in my alleged fraud. One by one, even my Army friends went silent, afraid of being dragged into the legal nightmare. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a cold Tuesday in March. I sat in the courthouse wearing my dress uniform, my Purple Heart pinned proudly over my left breast pocket. Mother and Tyler entered with their expensive legal team, shooting disgusted looks in my direction. Mother wore black as if attending another funeral, perhaps mine. Tyler's lead attorney was a shark named Harrison Blake, a man who specialized in destroying reputations for wealthy clients. He stood before the judge and methodically dismantled everything I held sacred. According to Blake, I was a pathological liar who had built an elaborate fantasy around a mundane military career. He claimed my injuries were self-inflicted, my medals were purchased online, and my entire service record was a fabrication designed to manipulate my dying father. The evidence they presented was overwhelming in its scope and terrifying in its creativity. Forged documents, doctored photos, sworn statements from people I had never met. Tyler had spent nearly $100,000 building a case that would not just defeat me legally, but destroy any possibility of rebuilding my life afterward. When it came time for me to present my defense, Sarah stood up with a thin folder and a prayer. We had the original will, my authentic military records, and the truth. But truth seemed fragile against such an elaborate web of lies. The judge looked skeptical as Sarah began outlining my actual service record, my legitimate wounds, my honest medals earned through blood and sacrifice. That was when Tyler made his most theatrical move. He stood up during my testimony and demanded that I remove my Purple Heart, immediately claiming I was committing a felony by wearing stolen valor decorations in a federal courthouse. The judge, clearly influenced by the mountain of fabricated evidence, ordered me to comply. The moment Tyler demanded I remove my Purple Heart, something died inside me. Not hope. I had lost that weeks ago when our childhood neighbors crossed the street to avoid speaking to me. What died was my last shred of belief that blood meant something, that family bonds could survive anything. I looked into my brother's eyes and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face, someone capable of cruelties I never imagined possible. Tyler stood up slowly, savoring the moment like fine wine. His expensive suit was perfectly tailored, his silk tie the color of fresh blood. Behind him, Mother sat ramrod straight, her lips curved in the faintest smile of satisfaction. 27 years of my life, and this was how they chose to remember me, as a fraud to be publicly dismantled. Your Honor. Tyler's voice rang through the courtroom with practiced authority. We cannot allow this charade to continue. My sister is wearing decorations she has no right to display, committing a federal crime in your very courtroom. I demand she remove that stolen medal immediately before we proceed further. Judge Morrison, an elderly man who clearly wanted this messy family dispute resolved, quickly looked uncomfortable but nodded. Miss Rivers, please remove the medal in question and hand it to the bailiff for examination. My hands shook as I reached for the small purple ribbon and gold heart that had meant everything to me. The medal was warm from being close to my racing heart. I remembered the day it was pinned to my hospital gown. Lieutenant Colonel Williams had tears in his eyes as he spoke about sacrifice and honor, about the price of freedom being paid in blood by America's finest. 3 soldiers from my unit had died in the explosion that earned me this medal. Now my own brother was calling their sacrifice and mine a lie. I earned this? I whispered, but my voice was lost in the vast courtroom. Tyler heard me anyway. He laughed, actually laughed, as I unpinned the medal with trembling fingers. Oh, Dakota, always the dramatic one. Even now, you cannot just admit the truth. You bought that online for $19.99 and we all know it. The bailiff walked over, his face impassive, but his eyes kind. He was probably a veteran himself, maybe even combat experienced. As I placed my purple heart in his outstretched palm, I saw something flicker across his expression. Disgust, but not directed at me. He had seen enough real warriors to recognize one even when she was being destroyed by her own family. Furthermore, Tyler continued, now fully in his element, I have here a signed affidavit from Colonel Janet Morrison stating that my sister was discharged early from her final deployment due to psychological instability, not combat wounds. She was never in any real danger. Your Honor, she spent most of her time on safe forward operating bases, filing paperwork and inflating her own importance. This was news to me. Tyler had somehow manufactured an entire fictional narrative about my service, complete with forged documents bearing the names of real officers. The depth of his betrayal was breathtaking. He had not just attacked my claim to Dad's land, he had systematically destroyed my identity, my honor, my very sense of self. Mother finally spoke, her voice carrying the refined cruelty she had perfected over decades of high society manipulation. Your Honor, my daughter has always struggled with the truth. Even as a child, she would create elaborate stories to make herself seem more important than she was. This military fantasy is simply the latest iteration of a lifelong pattern of deception. That is not true. I said louder this time, but Judge Morrison raised his hand for silence. Tyler's attorney, Harrison Blake, stood to deliver what they clearly intended as the killing blow. Your Honor, we have here sworn testimony from 8 different individuals who served with the defendant. They all state categorically that Dakota Rivers never saw combat, never sustained combat injuries, and certainly never performed any actions worthy of military decoration. 8 people. Tyler had found 8 individuals willing to perjure themselves in federal court to support his lies. The legal fees alone must have cost him a fortune, but the Rivers Family Trust Fund was substantial. He was essentially buying my destruction with money that should have been my inheritance too. Sarah Martinez objected weakly, but she was drowning in the tsunami of fabricated evidence. We had not anticipated anything this elaborate, this malicious. In my worst nightmares about this lawsuit, I had imagined Tyler claiming Dad was incompetent, or that I had unduly influenced him. I never dreamed he would attack the very foundation of who I was as a human being. Miss Rivers, Judge Morrison said wearily, do you have any documentation to refute these allegations about your military service? I looked at Sarah, who shuffled through her thin folder desperately. We had my official military records, of course, but Tyler's team had somehow created equally official-looking documents that contradicted everything. In a battle between competing paperwork, the side with more money and fewer scruples usually won. We have her authentic service record, Your Honor, but authentic according to whom? Blake interrupted smoothly. We have demonstrated that Miss Rivers has both the motive and the capability to forge such documents. She clearly has extensive knowledge of military procedures and terminology, making her the perfect person to create convincing fakes. The logical trap was elegant in its simplicity. My actual knowledge of military life became evidence of my ability to fake military life. My real experiences became proof of my capacity for elaborate deception. Tyler had turned my greatest source of pride into the weapon that would destroy me. As the hearing continued, I watched my brother's face carefully. There was no remorse there, no family loyalty struggling against greed. He was enjoying this. Every lie, every forged document, every moment of my humiliation brought him visible satisfaction. This was not just about money or land. This was about finally proving that he was the superior sibling, that his path of law school and corporate success was more valuable than my path of service and sacrifice. Your Honor, Blake said in conclusion. We ask not only that this fraudulent will be overturned, but that Miss Rivers be prosecuted for stolen valor, insurance, fraud, and perjury. She has built her entire adult life on lies and justice, demands accountability. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Local reporters scribbled notes frantically, already composing headlines about the hometown hero exposed as a fraud. Tyler smiled triumphantly while Mother nodded approvingly. They had won, and they knew it. Judge Morrison was reaching for his gavel when the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom burst open with a thunderous crash that echoed like a gunshot. The man who strode through those courthouse doors commanded attention like a force of nature. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every head turned. Every person in that room instinctively straightened their posture. He was tall, probably 6'4", with silver hair, perfectly groomed, and shoulders that had never learned to bend. His dress blue uniform was immaculate, adorned with ribbons and decorations that spoke of a lifetime spent in service to something greater than himself. But what truly captured everyone's attention were the stars on his shoulders, 4 of them gleaming like diamonds against the dark fabric. A full general. The kind of officer whose very presence suggested that important things were about to happen, that the ordinary rules of engagement no longer applied. Behind him walked 2 equally impressive figures, a lieutenant colonel wearing the distinctive green beret of Army Special Forces and a woman in a Navy uniform whose bearing screamed intelligence officer. They were not here by accident. This was a coordinated response to something that had triggered the highest levels of military attention. "Forgive the interruption, Your Honor," the general said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I am General Robert McKenna, United States Army. I understand there has been some discussion today regarding the service record of Sergeant Dakota Rivers." The way he said my name, with respect, with recognition, with absolute certainty about my identity, sent chills down my spine. I had never met this man, had no idea why he was here, but something in his tone suggested that the nightmare Tyler had constructed was about to collapse. Judge Morrison fumbled with his words, clearly unprepared for such an interruption. "General, this is highly irregular. We are in the middle of a proceeding based on fabricated evidence and perjured testimony," General McKenna interrupted smoothly. "Colonel Harrison here has some documentation that I believe will clarify matters considerably." The Special Forces officer stepped forward, carrying a thick folder marked with security classifications. "Your Honor, I am Colonel James Harrison, United States Army Special Operations Command. I have here authenticated copies of all official records pertaining to Sergeant Rivers' service, including classified mission reports that have been declassified specifically for this proceeding." Tyler's face had gone pale, but he tried to maintain his composure. "Your Honor, we have already established that my sister is capable of forging Mr. Rivers." General McKenna's voice cut through Tyler's protests like a blade. "I would strongly advise you to remain silent while we sort through the lies you have told about a decorated American soldier." The word lies hung in the air like a physical presence. Blake Tyler's shark attorney attempted to object. "General, with all due respect, military personnel cannot simply waltz into civilian courts and actually, counselor." The Navy officer spoke for the first time, her voice crisp with intelligence and barely contained fury. "When civilian courts become the venue for stolen valor accusations against legitimate Purple Heart recipients, the military absolutely has standing to intervene. I am Commander Sarah Chen, Office of Naval Intelligence. We have been monitoring this proceeding with great interest." Chen. The name hit me like a physical blow. This could not be coincidence. But before I could process the implications, Colonel Harrison was speaking again. "Your Honor, the individual claiming to be Colonel Janet Morrison, who supposedly provided testimony about Sergeant Rivers' psychological discharge, does not exist. There is no such officer in any branch of the United States military, past or present. The document bearing her signature is a fabrication. Blake stood up quickly, sweat now visible on his forehead. That is impossible. We have verified. You have verified nothing, General McKenna said coldly. You have participated in an elaborate fraud designed to destroy the reputation of a combat veteran. Colonel Harrison, please read the official citation for Sergeant Rivers's Purple Heart. The Green Beret opened his folder and began reading in a clear, carrying voice that reached every corner of the courtroom. On the 14th of August, 2019, Sergeant Dakota Rivers, while serving as a convoy security specialist with the 4th Infantry Division in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, distinguished herself by heroic action during an improvised explosive device attack on her unit. When the lead vehicle was disabled by the blast, Sergeant Rivers immediately left her defensive position and advanced through continued enemy fire to provide medical aid to wounded personnel. Despite sustaining severe injuries from shrapnel and secondary explosions, she continued to evacuate casualties until all personnel were secured. Her actions directly saved the lives of 3 fellow soldiers and demonstrated extraordinary courage under fire. The silence that followed was profound. Tyler looked like he might be sick. Mother's perfectly composed facade had cracked, revealing something ugly underneath. Blake was frantically shuffling through papers, probably trying to figure out how quickly he could distance himself from this disaster. Furthermore, Colonel Harrison continued, the 8 individuals who provided sworn testimony claiming to have served with Sergeant Rivers and witnessed her alleged misconduct have an interesting commonality. Every single one of them has been paid substantial sums by Mr. Tyler Rivers' law firm over the past 6 months. Curiously, only 2 of them have any military experience whatsoever, and none served in Afghanistan during the relevant time period. General McKenna stepped forward, his expression harder than granite. Your Honor, what we have witnessed here today is not merely a civil dispute over inheritance. This is a systematic attack on the honor and integrity of the United States military. The deliberate destruction of a combat veteran's reputation using fabricated evidence constitutes multiple federal crimes. And he turned to face Tyler directly, and my brother actually flinched under that withering stare. Mr. Rivers, did you honestly believe that you could manufacture lies about a Purple Heart recipient without the military taking notice? Did you think we would simply allow one of our own to be destroyed by your greed? Tyler finally found his voice, though it came out as a croak. We had reason to believe. The evidence seemed to suggest. The evidence, Commander Chen interrupted, was manufactured by your legal team using sophisticated forgery techniques and paid false witnesses. We have financial records showing every payment, communications intercepts revealing the coordination of false testimony, and forensic analysis proving that your so-called military documents were created on civilian equipment using commercially available software. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Reporters were frantically calling their editors, spectators were whispering excitedly, and Tyler's legal team was having what appeared to be an emergency conference at their table. Judge Morrison banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. Additionally, General McKenna said once silence was restored, there is the matter of Sergeant Rivers's father, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Rivers, retired. He served with distinction for 22 years, including 3 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. I had the honor of serving alongside him during Operation Desert Storm. Mike Rivers was one of the finest officers I ever knew, and he would be absolutely ashamed of what his son has done here today. The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. Dad had been a lieutenant colonel. Not the corporate lawyer I had always believed him to be, but a fellow soldier, a war veteran, someone who understood exactly what my service meant because he had walked the same path decades earlier. That is impossible, Mother said shrilly, speaking for the first time since the general's arrival. My husband never served in the military. He was a successful attorney his entire career. Commander Chin opened her own folder, pulling out what appeared to be a thick military personnel file. Mrs. Rivers, your husband maintained his civilian legal practice as a reserve officer. He was called to active duty multiple times throughout his career, but he chose to keep his military service separate from his civilian life. According to his personal statements, he wanted to protect his family from the stresses and dangers associated with military life. Dad had been protecting us. All those business trips, all those times he was away for weeks at a time, he had been serving his country while maintaining the fiction that he was just another small-town lawyer. He had hidden his warrior's heart to give Tyler and me a normal childhood, never knowing that his daughter would follow his true path while his son would one day use that path to destroy her. General McKenna approached the bench, his presence commanding absolute attention. Your Honor, I move that all charges against Sergeant Rivers be dismissed immediately, that her Purple Heart be returned to her with the court's apologies, and that this matter be referred to the appropriate federal authorities for prosecution of those responsible for this elaborate fraud. The courtroom held its collective breath as Judge Morrison considered his response. The tide had turned so completely, so dramatically, that even I was struggling to process what was happening. But one question burned in my mind above all others. How had these high-ranking officers even learned about this proceeding? Judge Morrison cleared his throat, his earlier skepticism replaced by obvious discomfort and growing anger. General McKenna, before we proceed, I need to understand how the military became aware of these proceedings. This was a civil matter in a local court, not something that would typically attract Pentagon attention. General McKenna exchanged a meaningful glance with Commander Chen before responding. Your Honor, we became aware of this situation through multiple channels. First, the fraudulent use of classified military documents triggers automatic security alerts. Second, someone very concerned about Sergeant Rivers' welfare reached out to appropriate channels. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. But most importantly, we were contacted by someone who knew Lieutenant Colonel Michael Rivers personally and was outraged to learn that his sacrifice was being dishonored by his own son. The general turned to face the gallery, his eyes scanning the crowd until they settled on an elderly man in the third row. I had noticed him earlier, but assumed he was just another curious local attracted by the courtroom drama. Now, under the general's direct gaze, the man stood up slowly, revealing the quiet dignity of someone who had spent decades in service. Master Sergeant William Torres retired, the man announced, his voice still carrying the crisp authority of a career soldier. I served under Lieutenant Colonel Rivers for 15 years. Mike Rivers was my commanding officer, my mentor, and my friend. When I learned what was happening to his daughter, I made some phone calls. Master Sergeant Torres walked to the front of the courtroom, his presence adding another layer of military authority to the proceedings. Despite his civilian clothes, everything about his bearing screamed professional soldier. Your Honor, I have known Dakota since she was 12 years old. I watched her grow up on military bases around the world. I was there when she enlisted, when she deployed, and when she came home wounded. Tyler tried to interrupt, but Torres fixed him with a stare that could have melted steel. I was also there when your father cried reading your letters from Afghanistan, Dakota. He was so proud of you, so terrified for your safety, and so grateful that you had inherited his sense of duty rather than his fear. Fear, Mother's voice cracked slightly. Michael was never afraid of anything. Torres turned to her with something that might have been pity. Ma'am, with all due respect, your husband was terrified every single day. Terrified that his military service would put his family in danger. Terrified that his children would follow his path into harm's way. And when Dakota enlisted, despite his efforts to steer her toward safer pursuits, he was both proud and heartbroken. Commander Chen stepped forward again, holding up a sealed envelope. Your Honor, Master Sergeant Torres provided us with something that Lieutenant Colonel Rivers left in his care before his death. A letter to be opened only if his military service was ever questioned or if his family needed proof of his dedication to both his country and his children. The letter was passed to Judge Morrison, who broke the seal with visible reluctance. His face grew increasingly grave as he read the contents silently. Finally, he looked up at Tyler with unconcealed disgust. Mr. Rivers, your father's letter details his military service in extraordinary depth. It also contains specific instructions regarding his will and his reasons for leaving the family farmland to your sister. He writes, and I quote, "Dakota has inherited my warrior's heart, while Tyler has inherited my civilian ambitions. The land should go to the one who understands sacrifice, not profit." Tyler's composure finally cracked completely. "That is impossible." Dad never said anything about military service. He never mentioned any of this. "Because he loved you enough to protect you from it," General McKenna said quietly. Lieutenant Colonel Rivers spent his entire adult life walking a tightrope between duty and family. He served his country while maintaining a civilian identity to keep you and your sister safe from the realities of military life. When Dakota chose to enlist, it broke his heart because he knew exactly what she would face. Master Sergeant Torres pulled out his own folder, much smaller than the others, but somehow more significant. "Dakota, your father asked me to give you this if anything ever happened to him." The letter was addressed to me in Dad's familiar handwriting, though the paper showed signs of age and careful storage. With shaking hands, I opened it and began to read aloud. "My dearest Dakota, if you are reading this, then something has happened to me, and you are facing challenges I hoped you would never encounter. You have always been my strongest child, the one most like me in ways that both terrify and inspire me. By now you know the truth about my military service, the secret I kept to protect you and Tyler from a world I hoped you would never need to understand. But you did understand it, didn't you? You felt the same call to serve, the same need to stand between danger and the innocent. I am so proud of you and so afraid for you because I know the price that service demands. I have left you the farmland not because Tyler is less deserving, but because you understand what land means to a soldier. It is something worth fighting for, worth bleeding for, worth coming home to. The land has been in our family for 4 generations of warriors. Great-grandfather fought in France. Grandfather survived the Pacific, and I served in the desert. Now it is your turn to be the keeper of our legacy. Tyler will find success in courtrooms and boardrooms, but you will find meaning in protecting something larger than yourself. If anyone ever questions your service, your sacrifice, or your worth, remember that you carry the blood of warriors. You are a Rivers, and we do not surrender." The letter was signed simply Dad, with a small notation underneath, "Master Sergeant Torres has the proof you need." Torres reached into his jacket and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, were Dad's military decorations: Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Combat Infantry Badge, and ribbons representing 22 years of distinguished service. Hidden at the bottom was a photographed Dad in desert camouflage standing next to a much younger General McKenna outside a command tent in Kuwait. "Your father saved my life during a Scud missile attack in 1991, General McKenna said softly. "I have been looking for ways to repay that debt for 30 years. Protecting his daughter from her brother's lies seems like a good start." The pieces were finally falling into place. Dad's mysterious business trips, his insistence that I could be anything I wanted to be his pride when I enlisted, despite Mother's objections. It all made sense now. He had been a warrior hiding in plain sight, protecting his family, while serving his country, living 2 lives so his children could live safely in one. Tyler slumped in his chair, the weight of his betrayal finally settling on his shoulders. Blake was frantically packing papers, probably calculating how quickly he could flee before the federal charges started flying. Mother sat in stunned silence, her carefully constructed worldview collapsing around her. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. Judge Morrison set Dad's letter down carefully, as if it were made of precious metal rather than aging paper. His transformation was complete. Gone was the weary civil servant eager to resolve a messy family dispute, replaced by a man who recognized that he had been manipulated into participating in something truly despicable. "Mr. Blake," he said, his voice carrying judicial authority that could not be ignored, "I want you to explain to this court how your firm obtained the fabricated military documents you presented as evidence." Blake's earlier confidence had evaporated entirely. He shuffled through papers desperately, as if the right legal precedent might somehow materialize to save him. "Your Honor, we relied on information provided by our client and conducted standard due diligence." "Standard due diligence does not include forging federal documents," Commander Chen interrupted. "We have traced the creation of these files to a graphic design company hired by your firm 3 months ago. We also have bank records showing payments to individuals who provided false testimony, all funded through your client trust account." The courtroom erupted again as reporters realized they were witnessing something far bigger than a family inheritance dispute. This was a federal case in the making, complete with fraud, conspiracy, and the systematic destruction of a combat veteran's reputation. Tyler finally found his voice, though it came out strangled and desperate. "I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted what was rightfully mine. Dad left me the law firm, but the land was worth more. It wasn't fair." "Fair." General McKenna's voice cut through Tyler's rambling like a sword through paper. "You think fairness involves destroying your sister's honor to steal her inheritance? You think fairness involves calling a Purple Heart recipient a fraud? You think fairness involves spitting on your father's grave by denying his service to this country?" Master Sergeant Torres stepped forward again, his face grim with purpose. "Dakota, there is something else your father wanted you to know. Something he made me promise to reveal only if Tyler ever tried to harm you." He pulled out one final document, this one bearing official legal seals. "Your father changed his will 6 months before his death after Tyler was caught embezzling from the law firm's client trust account. The firm's insurance covered the losses, and the matter was handled quietly. But your father lost all faith in Tyler's character." Mother gasped audibly. Tyler went white as a sheet. Even Blake looked shocked, probably realizing that his client had failed to mention several crucial facts about his background. "Embezzlement." Judge Morrison's voice carried the cold fury of someone who had been thoroughly deceived. "Mr. Rivers, you are an officer of this court. Were you planning to mention that you are currently under investigation for financial crimes?" Tyler's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The carefully constructed facade of respectability was crumbling in real time, revealing the desperate, greedy man underneath. Commander Chen opened her folder again, pulling out what appeared to be financial records. "Your Honor, Tyler Rivers stole $147,000 from his clients over an 18-month period. The money was used to fund a gambling addiction and maintain a lifestyle his legitimate income could not support. His father discovered the theft and was preparing to report it to the State Bar Association when the car accident occurred. Additionally," she continued, "the private investigation firm hired to fabricate evidence against Sergeant Rivers specializes in corporate espionage and blackmail operations. They are currently under federal investigation for multiple crimes, and several of their employees have already agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences." The net was closing around Tyler and Blake with mathematical precision. Every lie they had told, every document they had forged, every witness they had paid. It was all being systematically exposed and documented for federal prosecution. Judge Morrison banged his gavel hard enough to echo through the courthouse. "I am hereby dismissing all claims against Sergeant Dakota Rivers with prejudice." The will of Lieutenant Colonel Michael Rivers is validated in its entirety, and the farmland in question is confirmed as the sole property of Sergeant Rivers. He paused, his next words carrying the weight of absolute moral authority. Furthermore, I am ordering the immediate return of Sergeant Rivers' Purple Heart with the court's sincerest apologies for allowing it to be removed in the first place. No combat veteran should ever be subjected to such treatment in an American courtroom. The bailiff, who had been holding my medal throughout this entire nightmare, walked over with something approaching reverence. As he placed the Purple Heart in my hands, he whispered, "Thank you for your service, Sergeant. I am sorry this happened to you." But General McKenna was not finished. "Your Honor, I am formally requesting that this matter be referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office for prosecution. The crimes committed here include conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of federal documents, perjury, witness tampering, and stolen valor accusations made in bad faith. This case will serve as an example of what happens when civilians attack the honor of American warriors." Haller made one last desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. "Dakota, please, we are family. Dad would not want us to destroy each other like this. I can make this right. Family." I stood up slowly, my voice carrying a strength I had not felt in months. Family does not try to destroy each other for money. Family does not mock a sister's service to her country. Family does not spit on their father's grave by denying his sacrifice. I pinned my Purple Heart back to my uniform, feeling its familiar weight against my chest. "Tyler, you are not my family. You are a stranger who shares my DNA, but none of my values. Real family are the soldiers who bled beside me in Afghanistan. Real family are the veterans who supported me when my blood relatives tried to destroy me. Real family are people like Master Sergeant Torres, who kept his promise to a dead soldier by protecting that soldier's daughter." Mother tried one final manipulation, her voice breaking with theatrical emotion. "Dakota, honey, please, we can work this out. We can be a family again." "No, Mother, we cannot. You chose Tyler over truth. You chose money over honor. You chose to watch your daughter be destroyed rather than stand up for what was right. These choices have consequences." General McKenna approached me with formal military bearing. "Sergeant Rivers, on behalf of the United States Army and all your brothers and sisters in arms, I want to personally apologize for what you have endured. Your service to this nation has been exemplary. Your conduct under attack has been honorable, and your father would be immensely proud of the soldier and the woman you have become." The courtroom gradually emptied as Tyler and Blake were led away by federal agents for questioning. Mother left alone, her social standing in ruins, and her relationships with both children destroyed by her own choices. The reporters scattered to file stories that would make national headlines within hours. But I remained surrounded by real family, warriors who understood honor, sacrifice, and the bonds forged in combat. 3 months later, I stood on the front porch of the old farmhouse watching the sunrise paint the Nebraska hills in shades of gold and amber. The land stretched out before me like a promise kept. 4 generations of Rivers family history, now truly mine to preserve and protect. Dad's coffee mug sat beside me, still warm from my morning ritual of remembering him properly as the soldier and father he had always been. The legal aftermath had been swift and merciless. Tyler received 18 months in federal prison for fraud and conspiracy, while Blake lost his law license and faced his own criminal charges. Several of the fake witnesses were prosecuted for perjury, and the private investigation firm was shut down entirely. Mother moved to Florida, claiming she could no longer face the shame of staying in Nebraska, though we both knew she simply could not bear being around the daughter she had betrayed. The national media coverage had transformed my story from local family drama to a symbol of veteran advocacy. Military support organizations reached out offering assistance. Veteran groups invited me to speak about legal protection for service members, and politicians used my case as an example of why stolen valor laws needed stronger enforcement. My name became attached to federal legislation protecting combat veterans from fraudulent legal attacks. But the most meaningful change was much simpler and more personal. Master Sergeant Torres had become a regular fixture at the farm, helping me restore the old barn and sharing stories about Dad's military career that filled in decades of hidden history. Commander Chin, whose family name had shocked me that first day in court, turned out to be the daughter of Dad's former interpreter from his second Iraq deployment, a man whose family Dad had helped relocate to America years earlier. She had been looking for ways to honor that debt when my case came to military attention. General McKenna visited twice, once for an official ceremony where my Purple Heart was formally validated and blessed, and once simply as a friend remembering a fallen comrade by protecting his daughter. He brought with him photographs from Dad's deployments, stories about the man I had never truly known, and confirmation that courage ran in families like a genetic inheritance. The farm itself had become something Dad never could have imagined. A gathering place for veterans who needed space to heal, to remember, to find purpose after combat. I converted the old bunkhouse into transitional housing for homeless vets, partnered with VA programs to provide job training and counseling, and opened the land to Gold Star families who needed peaceful places to grieve. Sarah Martinez, my overwhelmed public defender, had transformed into one of my closest friends and the farm's legal counsel. She left her overworked public defender position to start a practice focused on veteran advocacy, using my case as the foundation for a new career protecting service members from legal abuse. Together, we established precedents that would help other veterans facing similar attacks on their honor and benefits. The restoration work never ended. Every morning brought new projects, repairing fences that had stood since grandfather's time, modernizing equipment to make the land productive again, building memorials to family members whose service had been hidden for decades. I found healing in working with my hands and connecting with earth that had sheltered 4 generations of warriors, in creating something lasting from the ashes of family betrayal. Local support had been overwhelming once the truth emerged. Neighbors who had turned away during the trial returned with apologies and offers to help. The same newspaper that had questioned my service ran a front-page series about hidden veterans in small communities. The high school where I had graduated valedictorian invited me back to speak about service and integrity, turning my story into a teaching moment for the next generation. Most importantly, I learned to distinguish between the family you are born into and the family you choose to build. Blood might create obligations, but it does not guarantee loyalty. Honor, shared sacrifice, and mutual respect created bonds stronger than genetics. My real family wore uniforms, understood duty, and would never abandon each other for money or social standing. Tyler wrote letters from prison, initially angry and blaming, later desperate and pleading, finally accepting and apologetic. I read them all but answered none. Forgiveness might come someday, but trust had been shattered beyond repair. Some bridges once burned could never be rebuilt. Mother's attempts at reconciliation were more sophisticated but equally hollow. Birthday cards with expensive gifts, holiday invitations to visit her in Florida, carefully worded letters that avoided taking responsibility while expressing vague regrets about misunderstandings. She wanted forgiveness without accountability, relationship without repentance. I sent everything back unopened. The most unexpected gift came from an investigation triggered by federal agents examining Tyler's finances. They discovered that Dad had maintained a separate bank account funded by his military pension money he had been saving for decades to leave to his children. The account contained nearly $300,000 divided equally between Tyler and me in a codicil to his will that his civilian lawyer had never discovered. Dad's final gift was not just money, but vindication. A handwritten note in the safety deposit box explained his reasoning. Tyler will always choose comfort over courage, profit over principle. Give him money because it is all he understands. Give Dakota land because she understands legacy. Trust them both to reveal their true nature through their choices. He had known. Somehow Dad had anticipated exactly how his children would react to inheritance, exactly how Tyler's character would corrupt him, exactly how I would need proof of worthiness rather than simple wealth. Even in death, he had been protecting me while giving Tyler enough rope to hang himself with his own greed. As autumn arrived, I established the Lieutenant Colonel Michael Rivers Foundation for Veteran Transition Services using Dad's hidden inheritance as seed money. The foundation would provide legal protection for veterans facing fraudulent attacks, emergency housing for service members in crisis, and advocacy for military families dealing with civilian legal systems that did not understand warrior culture. Every sunset reminded me that survival was not just about enduring the darkness, but about building light for others to follow. Dad had hidden his military service to protect his children, but I would be public about mine to protect other veterans. Tyler had tried to destroy my honor to steal my inheritance, but that attempt had revealed the strength of bonds forged in service rather than blood. The farm would remain in the Rivers family, but now it truly represented what Dad had always intended. A place where warriors could find peace, where sacrifice was honored, where the next generation learned that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the personal cost. Standing on this land that had sheltered 4 generations of soldiers, I understood finally what Dad had been trying to tell me through his choices. Legacy was not about money or property or social standing. Legacy was about teaching others to choose courage over comfort, service over selfishness, honor over expedience. The war was over, justice had been served, and family, real family, had triumphed. Looking back on this entire ordeal, I have to ask, have you ever discovered that the family you thought you knew was completely different from who they really were? When someone you trusted betrayed you for money, how did you find the strength to rebuild? Sometimes the worst attacks come from those closest to us, but sometimes those attacks reveal who your real family truly is. If this story of family revenge and ultimate justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and share your own experiences with family betrayal in the comments below. Subscribe for more stories about standing up to toxic family members and finding your chosen family among people who truly understand your worth. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to vindication, and remember, blood may make you related, but loyalty makes you family. May you all find the courage to choose honor over convenience, and may karma always catch up to those who try to destroy good people for selfish gain.